We're on a path right now to really change the Middle East.
What we've just witnessed in the region over the last 10 years is the Islamists getting their chance and failing enormously and producing catastrophe.
The police, Mubarak government killed us, killed the people.
We want all the power to the people.
These people have already got rid of one president, but clearly the struggle for power here continues.
The Abraham Accords changed the neighborhood in the Middle East in a dramatic manner.
After decades of division and conflict, we mark the dawn of a new Middle East.
So you're about to put a sticker saying this is straight from Israel to the United Arab Emirates?
Yes, it's very exciting.
Bringing hope to all the children of Abraham.
It's a perfect example of how a strong America can be such an incredible force for good. A lot of improbabilities that came into being in relatively short order. A lot of God's will here.
We all know that in the last 70 years, if there was one thing missing in the Middle East, was peace. I believe we're living in a unique time, a special time in the Middle East, a special time for the Jewish people here in the land, a nation that was persecuted, a nation that the whole neighborhood came against her. Suddenly we see that things are changing. Suddenly we see that there are people who want to do business with us. There are people who want to have peace with us. A great new era in the Middle East. It's a great opportunity to thank our friends in America, to thank the US government for taking a part in this important peace in the Middle East. Let us watch together.
For decades, Israel's been unique in the sense that we have barely had any relationship with our neighbors, and even the peace agreements we've had have been tenuous or cold at best. But over the past year or so, something incredible has happened where suddenly our country that's been isolated, that's been alone, is now cultivating strong, warm peace agreements and relationships with neighbors throughout the Middle East.
The Arab Spring profoundly changed a number of areas. There's a kind of succession war being fought out by all kinds of different tribal, sectarian, and ethnic forces.
Most of the nations in the region are looking to the United States and saying, are they going to be a strong ally and continue to maintain Iran as a weak threat? Or are they going to lift the sanctions and Iran will then become a much more serious threat?
It almost seems like it's this grassroots movement where the people themselves, they've been waiting for an opportunity to find new friends in the neighborhood.
It becomes almost natural. They would look around the region for friends and they would alight upon the presence of Israel as a natural partner.
If you zoom back 5-10 years and said in the span of 2 years, this is going to happen, someone would say you're crazy. The Middle East is a region that spans across most of Western Asia and North Africa. It includes 18 countries, but sometimes the list feels a little longer. The modern Middle East came about at the end of World War I. After conquering the lands controlled by the Ottoman Empire, the British and the French divided the very factioned region into brand new nation-states. The newly drawn borders served the interests of Britain and its allies, while completely ignoring the deep tensions and violent conflicts between various ethnic and religious groups in this region. This smashing together of conflicted peoples created a divided Middle East, and a strongman government began to take control of many of these countries. In 2011, the Arab Spring began. Unrest flooded state after state as the people rose up to overthrow their leaders. But as dictatorial regimes fell, oftentimes Islamic extremism rose up in their place, and the Middle East has not been the same since. I met with Dr. Jonathan Spire to take a deep look at how the region is still clamoring for stability today.
Good to see you, Jonathan.
Hello, how are you doing, Mati? Good to see you. Well, one point which needs to be immediately made at the beginning is that, it's common to talk about the Middle East as the Arab world. It's important to remember that the Arabs themselves are only one of the peoples that are present here in the Middle East. Yeah. Turkey, of course, is a non-Arab country. Iran, non-Arab country. And, of course, there is Israel, the Jewish state. It's a complex mosaic of different languages, different traditions, and different peoples. Now, if we put on top of that the kind of geopolitical arrangements of, who's working with who, so to speak, I think that we can separate the region into a number of different power alliances. Firstly, you have an alliance of countries which are traditionally associated with the United States and with the West. The State of Israel, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the Republic of Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Kingdom of Morocco, Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, and a number of others. This is one bloc. Now, I would say there are two others, and these two others are kind of anti-stability blocs, which are trying very hard to change or revolutionize the region. The most significant of those counter blocs is the one led by Islamic Republic of Iran. Lebanese Hezbollah, the Iraqi Shia militias, are basically creations of the Iranians, whose specialization is the creation and activation of proxy movements. So this is a gathering of countries whose intention is revolutionary in nature, whose intention is changing the balance of power in the region and becoming the key power in the Persian Gulf region, reaching the Mediterranean, tending to destroy Israel, developing a nuclear capacity for Iran in order to cover and ensure itself whilst it pursues that agenda.
If you look at the stability level in the region, they're pretty much the last one standing.
A whole number of countries have, astonishingly, over the last decade, effectively ceased to exist as countries. Iraq, Syria, Lebanon to an extent, Yemen, Libya also. The third bloc, which I wanted just to mention, is the bloc smaller, but I would say also profoundly significant, is the bloc of countries and movements aligned with the Republic of Turkey. Emirate of Qatar in the Gulf, to a degree the Hamas movement, which rules Gaza, the government of Siraj down in Tripoli, in Libya also, the remnants of the Syrian rebels. You will very often find it is forces associated with one or another of these three major power blocs contesting, in a certain sense, the future of the region.
Everything that was the natural construct of this region falls apart and goes back to being this at war, at tension kind of region.
Yeah, I would say that at the root of all this is the failure of these states to successfully develop in an economic and societal way.
So we've given a lot of attention to the negative things that have happened in this region, the instability, the wars. From where we're sitting today, a lot of positive things have been happening.
It's important to remember that Israel, has come through this period of unrest or this period of instability. That's to say, Israel's one of the last men standing, so to speak, in a very profoundly shaken up, disrupted region. Here is a state which, for all its problems, and there are manifold problems, has a functioning economy, functioning armed forces, functioning borders, functioning economy and structure. So this gives Israel a great deal of potential attractiveness to partners in the region.
As in what? As in we're positioned in a more powerful stance than we were before.
Well, here's the thing, when everyone else has become shaken up and you're not shaken up, then you kind of, in a sense, by default become, of greater
higher
significance.
ranks,
That old regional order always placed the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as the main disruptive element in the region. And it now seems to us pretty absurd to do that.
It seems trivial.
It seems trivial compared to 500,000 dead in Syria and so on and so forth.
We're here this afternoon to change the course of history. After decades of division and conflict, we mark the dawn of a new Middle East. In a few moments, these visionary leaders will sign the first two peace deals between Israel and the Arab state in more than a quarter century.
In 2020, Israel signed a series of official agreements with some pro-stability countries in the region.
This day is a pivot of history, bringing hope to all the children of Abraham.
First, it was the United Arab Emirates, then Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco, and Oman, and hopefully more will follow suit. These deals, brokered by the US, are nothing short of historic. They normalize relations between Israel and their partners for peace, encouraging trade and cooperation.
Congratulations on this outstanding achievement. Congratulations.
These agreements are called the Abraham Accords. They pay homage to the shared heritage between the Jewish world and the Muslim world that goes back to Father Abraham.
The Abraham Accords are very much a new phenomenon, but when you look back into history, you realize we're in a way going back to the place Israel always had as a place of meeting and trade, commerce and connection between Asia, Africa, and cultures and religions in this region. For millennia, the Via Maris, the Way of the Sea, connected Asia, Africa as a trade route that was running through this very region. It is new, but at the same time, we're reconnecting to the historical roots of Israel being a hub of connection and trade in the Middle East.
We're downtown Jerusalem on our way to meet with U.S. Ambassador David Friedman. This is a guy who's been incredibly instrumental in reshaping the Middle East as we know it. He's been in the room on almost every big decision that has happened in the Middle East in the last 4 years. From the Abraham Accords to commerce agreements, I mean, he's been there with every change that has happened. I'm truly, personally fascinated to find out how things looked from the inside. Well, Ambassador Friedman, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Mati, for having me.
I think you're coming off this almost 4-year period of a roller coaster of international relations, changes in the Middle East. You were on the inside on all these deals and all these changes. What is your impression? What is your takeaway from this time?
A lot of good things came out of one basic principle, which is that the United States will stand with Israel. I think everything else flowed from it. And ultimately, the ability to make peace with 5 Muslim nations.
The power structure, the alliances in the Middle East have completely been shuffled. Israel, several other countries around the Mediterranean, the United States that have said we're positive, we're for peace, prosperity, we're for financial development. We're not for the same things as these disruptive countries.
Yeah,
and you got to sit in office for that.
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly the highlight of my career, although it was something we were nurturing during the entire time.
What was it in the decision-making process that allowed so much to happen in such a short amount of time?
So the president said to Jared, he said to me, think outside the box. Think of what might work. I want to make this area more stable, more prosperous. I want to increase the chances of peace. And what we concluded, principle number 1, stand with your friends, stand with your allies, and the most important ally, of course, was Israel.
Making peace will not be easy. We all know that. Both sides will face tough decisions.
Second principle, don't flinch from your enemies. The United States is the strongest country in the world. It's got a $750 billion annual military budget. We're not going to allow rogue nations to threaten the policy of the United States. You know, it started, I think, in May of 2017. The president traveled to the Middle East. It was his first foreign trip. When he went to Saudi Arabia, he convened 50 different Muslim countries. He looked them in the eye and said, look, I am looking to all of you to eradicate radical Islamic terrorism. You have to do it first because it's beginning here on this part of the world. I think that resonated tremendously throughout the region. Beyond that, I think a very clear message began to resonate within the region. Very simple. Israel is not the problem. Israel is the solution. They said, wait a second. Number 1, we have a common adversary in Iran. Number 2, there's great opportunity here for tourism, for cultural exchange, for economic advancement, discovery, for technology, for biotech, ag tech. Now, once the Emiratis came in, Bahrain was coming in, the Sudanese, Morocco, in all these places, the people had already come to the view that they wanted to be, within a circle of peace. And it just took a little bit of kind of strategic maneuvering to get everybody there. I'll leave you with a thought. Our founding fathers said that there are certain rights that are endowed by our Creator that are unalienable. Everybody knows life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Where did the founding fathers get that view? By reading the Bible. And where does the Word of God come from in the Bible? Isaiah says, out of Zion shall go forth the law, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Right here, where we're sitting right now, this is the source. This is the wellspring from which the American Republic was created, from the American values were created. We've become untethered to those core values that made us a great nation. And so I think Jerusalem's the answer. I think more people understand what it brings to the world.
You've had a very unique opportunity to truly influence and bless the Jewish people in the land of Israel.
It was a blessing for me. That was the greatest honor of my life.
The changes taking place today can be seen as a sign that God is restoring this region to its former glory. He wants to create a prosperous future in the region where our story of faith began, the Middle East.
What does a new Middle East look like in a year, 2 years, 3 years?
We have to always be careful with optimism in our region, unfortunately. But I do think you can see the beginnings of a sense in which there is an emergent generation that is no longer excited by the prospect of political violence, not excited at the prospect of, revenge against this or that ancient colonial power, no longer energized.
They
just want exactly a good life.
With the right policies, the Middle East should become exactly the opposite of what it was, which is the source of threats and terrorism and violence exported around the world. I think it can become much more open, much more prosperous, much more free-thinking, I think we can expand, freedom of religion dramatically, human rights dramatically. I mean, all the things that you want to do as a diplomat, in foreign policy, they're here for the taking, but we got to stay on this track.
To see firsthand the Abraham Accords in action, I met with Marina.
Hey, Marina.
Hi.
So this is an exciting day for you.
Very exciting day.
Who personally oversaw the first Israeli export directly to the United Arab Emirates.
This package is going straight from here
to United Arab Emirates. Yes.
For the first time.
First time. First time for us and first time for Israel.
It goes straight from here into the container onto a ship to the United Arab Emirates.
Exactly. You can just have direct relationships with our customers that are glad to receive our products.
It's incredible how just overnight, a country that we had no official relationships with, they can just call you on the phone and we have open commerce, open conversation. It's so dramatically different than it was just a short time ago.
It's very dramatic. It's very dramatic both for us and also for them.
We're living in exciting times.
Yes.
This first shipment was sent from Davik factory, an Israeli adhesive tape manufacturer based in the kibbutz Sde Boker, where Israel's first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, chose to live out his final days.
Thank you for coming to visit us at Davik at kibbutz Sde Boker.
It's awesome to be here.
Let's see the factory.
Let's do that.
I met with Davik's VP, Eran, to take a closer look inside their impressive operation.
We make adhesive tapes. This is what we know how to do. We are exporting everywhere to about 30 countries around the world.
So, a short time ago, Israel signed the Abraham Accords. What did you think when you heard that, when you first heard that?
It's great. It's a great breakthrough because as exporters, we need new markets. And it's giving us the opportunity to do business with new market in that area. We had a connection with United Arab Emirates, I think for 4 or 5 years before the agreement was signed, but we couldn't do business with them. We didn't have the ability to ship it to them, and they didn't have the ability to pay to us, to our Israeli bank. It was a barrier. For me to get the first phone call from the area code 971, which is the Emirate, direct phone call to my cellular, it was something that was impossible. And eventually, we are people, they are people that just want to make business.
It's incredible how overnight, the UAE, a country that we had no official relationship with, are now our friends. There's open commerce, open communication, warm relationships, and a bright, open future.
The first Prime Minister of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, his house is 200 meters from this factory. And when the people of the kibbutz heard that the first container from Israel to the Emirates is going from this factory, it was a joy. It was very emotional here. We had flags of Israel and the Emirates. The children of this kibbutz got the first lesson about peace and the influence of it. We were very, very happy. I was very, very happy because I think that eventually the change in the Middle East will be a change between people, not the government. People making and talking to one each other. If a worker in the Emirates is seeing the flag of Israel and seeing the material coming from Israel, he knows that Israel is not just, enemies.
Shalom again. Shalom from Jerusalem. With us today we have Dr. Emmanuel Navon, specialist on Israel and the Middle East, and he's an author of a very unique book, The Star and the Scepter. Shalom.
Shalom. Nice. Thank you for having
Emmanuel,
me.
great having you with us. Emmanuel, there's no doubt that the Middle East has changed. And actually, the Middle East is changing as we talk very rapidly. Can you elaborate on the Middle East today?
So I think we have to understand that this Middle East was basically created politically by Europe after World War I. These artificial entities were taken over during the Cold War by the two new superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. And then you had the Iranian Revolution. And the Iranian Revolution was against both the West and the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, all you had left was the West in the Middle East and Islamism. And eventually, Islamism became a stronger and stronger force in the Middle East. And until today, it is shaping the region. Since Israel's independence in 1948, Israel became the focus of the Arab world. Instead of focusing on themselves, on building their countries, on building democracies and thriving economies, the Arab leaders were only focusing on Israel.
10 years ago, the conflict on the Middle East was Israel, the Palestinian issue, and the Arab world. Today, we see that the Israeli-Palestinian issue is almost a non-issue.
Right. Arab leaders did not want to officially normalize their relation with Israel and benefit from their relation with Israel without some kind of political agreements between Israel and the Palestinians. But this agreement has been unreachable for decades. So today they realize that Israel is not their enemy. In fact, the biggest enemy for as far as the Arab countries are concerned is Iran and its nuclear program. So basically what those leaders are saying is that, we're not going to wait another 30 years before we can benefit from our relation with Israel. And when I say benefit, it's not only the security and intelligence cooperation vis-a-vis Iran. I mean, the economic cooperation, that's also why they...
Why do they need Israel? Why didn't they go to England, France?
Because that's where Israel is the Silicon Valley of the Middle East. They know that Israel is the best ally against the Iranian threat. They know that Israel has the technology that enables you to have sustainable growth when you can no longer rely on natural resources alone. And they also come to realize today, and recognize, by the way, and you see it in many social interactions between Jews and Arabs in those countries, they're actually abandoning the propaganda that they used for so many years, saying, well, the Jews don't belong here, it's a foreign people. Those countries, at least, they don't say that anymore. And that, I think, is the real key to peace. People-to-people peace. And that is really a change, a welcome change. And in this peace agreements in the Abraham Accords between Israel and the UAE and other Arab countries.
Do you have a message to the world out there, to Christians around the world?
Well, first of all, we very much appreciate your support and your love for Israel. I want to tell you that this love is mutual. I think we also have a common destiny and a common values to promote, not only in Israel, but also throughout the West. And God willing, together, we will continue to promote those values.
Thank you very much, Dr. Navon. It was a great interview.
Thank you.
It was very enlightening.
My pleasure, and a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, and stay with us for another Inside Israel and the Middle East. Thank you for joining us as we provide a spiritual insight of what God is doing in Israel and in the Middle East. If you want to learn more about what God is doing in Israel, make sure to visit us on our webpage and follow us on social media. Shalom, and God bless you from Jerusalem.